So, I want to kick off a bit with what we're seeing, as I said, for probably 10 or 15 minutes from the research that we've done. And this is the 10th year of our Global Mobile Trends report. I'd like to say it's become shorter over time, but it has not. It's only gotten longer. But that's a testament to the fact that the industry is getting more complex. There's a lot more going on in the industry, right? 10 years ago, it wasn't just all about connectivity. 10 years later, it's definitely much more than connectivity when we think about the mobile industry. So there's a QR code. Feel free to get that. We will send these slides out to everyone, so you will have a copy of that. And so these are the parts that we're actually looking in there. We're going to talk about networks. If you look at this, we're not going to talk about this. This is just a preview of what you see in the research. A bit about consumer 5G. Enterprise 5G split into a number of different topics. Right? Private wireless, enablers like APIs. It's 2025. Have to have at least one chapter on AI. And they're really talking a bit about what telcos are doing, but also sort of what they're going to be doing going forward in the future. And we'll address some of this in the panel. eSIM's a very big topic for us. And it's a very big topic in part because we've got some great insights being inside the GSMA, but also because we hear it's oftentimes ignored by other research firms. So we wanted to spend some time on eSIM. NTN and satellite, as I mentioned, big part of what we're focused on. And really here in the report, looking at commercialization, looking at what it's going to take to actually make this all work. Because we've been talking about satellite for a number of years, and then what's going forward. And then sustainability. I don't know if any of you were here. We did a telco energy efficiency benchmark launch just before this. We work with a number of operators across the world to understand their energy usage, their energy efficiency. Just launched that report right before this. Hit some of the highlights in the Global Trends report. And again, if you're interested in that, let us know. We'll get you that information. Want to thank our partners. So this is a piece of research that we did in sponsorship and in collaboration with Globalstar, Druid, and the ESA. Has anyone been to the GSMA Pavilion? The ESA was down there yesterday. There was a Spanish astronaut, thanks to the ESA. So they've been great partners, and I didn't know there were Spanish astronauts. I feel really bad. I believe there's 2 or 3. It was a really cool story. So I want to look a bit back about how the world has changed since we did the first iteration of this report, right? And you sort of look at what's going on in terms of the industry's revenues kind of going up, but you look at that revenue growth, which was up and down. I think we probably know the story if we're all in the industry. But what I think is interesting is sort of looking at some of the highlights, and I don't know, it always feels a bit nostalgic to sort of think about what happened, right? Back when we first started doing this, right before that, this was when Facebook bought WhatsApp. Do you remember was anyone here at MWC the year that took place? It was like the huge news, right? It was like, oh my Lord, what just took place, right? That year, that dominated it, right? We had a Trump presidency, which was kind of a shock for many people when it took place the first time. We had the Starlink launch. We obviously had a pandemic somewhere in the middle there, but we can forget that. And now we're already past things like ChatGPT, Bitcoin going over $100,000 to Donald Trump 2.0. It is amazing when you look back at a decade how much has changed and how much has occurred across the world. And of course, that puts into perspective how we think about the industry and what's taking place in our industry, right? So the move in AI, right? And we'll talk a bit more about that of AI, right? But really this idea that we are in an era of uncertainty, right? I was at a customer's introduction and press briefing the other day, and the number of questions about geopolitics, about things that the CEO of this company could not answer, right? Everything from natural disasters to geopolitics. We are in an era of uncertainty that has impacts on the business that all of us do. Of course, that uncertainty includes the launch of new technologies. I talked with my team earlier, and I think probably the most surprising, who here was surprised when the DeepSeek news came out? For whom was the most surprising part of DeepSeek the fact that we thought it was surprising? Like we should recognize this stuff is going to happen. If you deprive people of technologies to do what they're going to do, they're going to find better ways to do it, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. This is the space that we're in. We are going to see these new disruptions, technology, economies, politics. But of course, the fundamental questions 10 years later remain the same. How do we grow the industry? How do we profit from all these technologies? So I think, first off, as we look a little bit into some of what we're covering in the research, it's fair to say the AI era is here. I think it is hilarious. As an analyst, we often get asked, what are the big trends of the show? What do you think will be the big trends of the show? I think it's a silly question, right? Because we all kind of know what the big, I think the better question should be, what are the small trends that we're not paying attention to? Because the number of times people say, oh, well, we know AI is going to be a big trend. It was a big trend last year. It will be a big trend next year, right? What I think is interesting from our perspective is recognizing the role telcos play, where you've got a majority, at least per our research, who are active in it. And we see that initial wave last year after getting used to it, but now really seeing that ramp up. Of course, the question is, where is the focus? Revenues versus costs? And obviously the answer is both, right? Telcos are going to be focused on both. But when we go out and we talk to operators, what do we see, right? We do see this revenue focus as what they want to hit, new revenue streams, customer service, but deprioritizing some of the stuff that may seem a little bit easier, right? Improving productivity, reducing OpEx. Maybe a little bit of a worry of these things sort of at the end of lower priorities in terms of things like sustainability. But the reality is they're all important and critical. Big question, though, is how do we hit those first things? Because we've seen a lot of efforts around making ourselves more efficient, the AI for networks. But how do we actually grow revenues and use AI to help telcos grow their business? Still, we're in the early days. That said, I think what we are seeing, which is a really good sign, is we are seeing experimentation, right? There is this fact that if we look at the different models out there from operators and we look at what they're doing with AI, a lot of great examples to be followed, right? I'm not going to go into all of these, right? But you see everything from sell-through of services from hyperscalers and AI innovators to GPU as a service. It feels like last year was the year of GPU as a service. We hear AI factories from everyone being launched, no matter how you want to define what an AI factory is. You're beginning to see some of this move from AI for networks to networks for AI, particularly as we see edge launches being rolled out. Definitely going to want to talk a bit about to Verizon and talk a bit about some of the edge AI stuff given the launches. But you're beginning to see this, which is really good. It means we're at the cusp. This is when things begin to get interesting because we'll see actually what takes place. Expect to see more of this. And I also want to call this out because it's probably not as paid attention to. We also see some interesting things from telcos that only telcos can do. Because you hear questions like GPU as a service, could other folks do that? Well, maybe, right? Some of these telco factories. But things like we see from Orange in this top line, where we're looking at translation. We're looking at helping, because telcos work with so many different types of customers across different countries, having to address different market needs, looking at some of the translation stuff. I think some of you may know here in Barcelona, for the Barcelona supercomputer work, they're doing work on helping to integrate the Catalan language into LLMs, because you can imagine most of the work taking place around LLMs is focused on a small handset of big languages, the smaller ones not so much. The work that telcos are doing to address those smaller languages I think sometimes gets lost. Super, super important. Also a huge opportunity as they address their customers. 5G, I think it will remain a topic. I think it's clearly no longer the headline topic because it's not new. And to those of us in the industry, it kind of feels weird that we're halfway through the cycle. It's 2025, right? If we expect the 5G cycle to be kind of from the 2020 to 2030, when many people see 6G coming around, we're halfway through that, right? Halfway through it, what do we see? Well, about 25% global penetration. We're seeing new launches picking up as we go towards this southern part of the world, as we head towards the Southeast Asia, as we look at other parts of even sub-Saharan Africa. That's great. Of course, we still look at the question of monetizing 5G. We all know that was a big theme last year, right? Who didn't expect that to be a theme this year, monetizing 5G? The fact that monetizing 5G was a theme of the show last year, and it's going to be a theme of the show this year, means we haven't quite figured it out. I mean, that's if it remains a theme and a question for multiple years, it means we haven't probably figured it out. And so there is this question, right, of where do we sit? Here's some work that we've done. We've seen out of the consumer side of things. And from the consumer side of things, what do we see? We do hear from consumers. There is a willingness and interest in paying a premium for 5G. The question is, what do you need to do to gain that premium? You can't just say, hey, I'm going to give you 5G. You're going to have a 5G symbol on your phone. It has to be tied to something that they get, some value, right? There still needs to be that ROI. Is it gaming? Is it VR? It will depend upon your market. But it can't just be there's a 5G button on your phone, and now you see that symbol and we're going to pay more, right? Has to be tied to value. Whether it's application, whether that's the speeds, it needs to be there. Now, you might ask, what's missing from here? What's missing here is from B2B. We're going to talk a bit about B2B monetization, B2B sales afterwards. We'll be talking about on the panel. It's worth noting, though, although B2B progress has been good for operators, consumers still represent 70% of revenues for operators. It's why they're so important. It's why things like this and the premium they're willing to pay is so important. You know, I think network strategies are something we always look at because obviously those networks, foundational, they underpin what's going on around the services that are offered. And so, you know, said it in the beginning, the main question over this last 10 years remains the same. How are we making money from this? So better technology is cool, but the question is, what are we going to do with it? Now, I'm going to give you an interesting data point here. This is the second year in a row where we've said, and I've said, I think 5G Advanced is going to be a big theme of the show. I promise you it'll be the second year in a row where I'm wrong. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. That should have been in my head. Because we went into the show looking back to 2022. 2022 is when marketing around 5G Advanced began to pick up. All the big vendors began talking about it, right? 2024 is when we saw those standards coalesce. Totally expected we'd begin to hear about it. Didn't hear much about 5G Advanced last year. Went into the show thinking we were going to hear about it. It's unclear. I will not be surprised if we come out of this and 5G Advanced is not a big topic from the show. We expected it to be. When we go out and talk to operators, we see the number of percent that say 5G Advanced is critical to their network transformation plans, 90%. It tops almost anything else, right? You ask them how quickly they're going to deploy, the deployment scale is very, very quickly. But the reality is, until they have a very clear view of how they're going to make money from it, we're not going to see that movement. And it's unclear where that sits. We see what they want. When we go and we talk to them, we see a sort of a mix of things like, yes, low-cost IoT is important to them. You might know RedCap, right? You hear a lot about RedCap. That's important to them. You see things like satellite integration, 5G multicast. But ultimately, you can get that low-cost IoT without 5G Advanced. Do RedCap as part of Release 17 before 5G Advanced. Satellite integration is taking place regardless. 5G multicast. Who here lived through 4G multicast video? No one? 3G multicast? Anyone? I think didn't we do some NFL? Didn't we do some NFL stuff? It was not been a success. It has not been a success with 3G or 4G. It's interesting to see the optimism from operators around 5G, but again, not surprising if we don't see a lot of momentum around 5G Advanced. So I feel sorry for those of you who thought we were right on that one. Time, you know, we still have time. Maybe we'll see something change. You know, I think we'll have a great fireside chat to talk a bit about satellite integration, but I think the important part here to recognize are a couple things. One, if we go back a few years ago, the question was, are satellite providers and operators friends, enemies, somewhere in the middle? How do we all get along? Are they partners? I think the industry really had a question of how do we relate to this other industry? Here we are, 2025, but 70% plus operators have relationships with satellite providers, right? That's crazy, right? The industry has seen the value. Now, direct to sell is moving very quickly. That has helped changing it. It's a new narrative. It really makes it very different from what we've seen in the past. But the question then is, what now? And this year, after multiple years of buildup, is a year where we should begin to see commercialization. It makes it very fun. But I think part of that's driven by not just things like direct to sell, but also recognition of we can get tons of value. There's $35 billion at play going out over the next 10 years. When we think about the value of IoT, getting IoT connections to where we're not talking about them right now, thinking about direct to sell, but also network resilience. when I go back and talk about some of those sort of under the radar themes that maybe won't be headlines here at MWC, network resilience is one of those. Everyone's thinking about how do we make sure that we have network connectivity should something go wrong from a natural disaster or a human-caused disaster or something. Satellite clearly fits into that. I'm going to end with this, sustainability. So I think we've been talking about sustainability for a number of years here with my team, particularly from an energy efficiency perspective. And I think a few years ago, you might remember, this really became a huge topic, partly driven by the fact that energy prices went up. And it was much more critical to figure out how do we become efficient with what's going on. Now, that part remains. Energy efficiency is still important. It's getting a new lease on life given all the new AI tools, some of which have been around for a while. But what's interesting this year and where things have changed is how we begin to see that focus moving from just energy efficiency to fully true sustainability that looks at things like circularity, right? And how do we look at scope 3 emissions, not just scope 2, and for those of you who don't know, those are the full set of emissions that go across your supply chain. And how do we look at that? And how are they even getting reported? Because when we work with operators, and this is data from the operators that we work with, there's a good number that are tracking this and tracking it well. But there's a large share that still don't, right? They still have a lot of work to do tracking now their scope. And don't get me wrong, that is not easy. Tracking scope 3 emissions when you're looking across your supply chain, very, very difficult, but critical if we're taking sustainability meaningfully, and if we want to make sure we're doing what regulators will ask for, which is understanding that. So with that, I want to say thank you for the brief view of this. We're going to move on over to the next part. Now, we do now have the whole panel here, so you want to still stay at the end? Okay, so we're going to go to the panel. Again, you can get the report there, but you'll also get these slides afterwards, so don't worry. So with that, let's move over to the panel, and I'm glad you all made it here. Why don't you all come on up? I've said this to all of you, I think, offline, but just to everyone, one of my least favorite things of any panel or session that I go to is when the introductions take place and the person reads everyone's bios, and they've got they're reading this, and it is Anshul has 2 dogs and has his MSCE and Microsoft certified training, and sometimes you kind of wonder. I know the PR people do their best, but they just copy and paste. So I'm going to let you all introduce yourself and tell me if you want to tell us about your pets and your certifications. Feel free, but why don't we just go a bit of who you are, who you work for, and sort of what you do there. So we'll start with you, Anshul.
Hi, Anshul this side. I work for Rakuten, both Rakuten Mobile and Symphony. Been in the Open RAN world since 2018, I guess, in Japan, and now helping other telcos across the world with Rakuten Symphony.
I'm Iris Mayer. I'm the Chief Product and Marketing Officer for Verizon Business. And I feel I've been in the industry way too long, because when I was listening to Peter, I'm like, okay, even before 3G. So
I know how you feel. We've been around since 2G. Tadhg Kenny, President for Strategic Accounts from Druid Software in Dublin. We have a software application for the core, 5G going back to 2G, and we've been doing this for 25 years, all around private and business use, let's say, as opposed to carrier. Nice to see you all.
And so Ronnie Vasishta, I'm the Senior Vice President of Telecom at NVIDIA. NVIDIA is a platform company, as we know, but it goes to market vertically, and telecom is a very important part of our vertical strategy.
Great. Wonderful. So I really hope these questions are going to go in all sorts of different directions, so not just the ones I have, which means I hope we're going to ask more questions of each other and go beyond what I've got here. But I'm going to start with an easy one, 5G. Right? Again, it feels like we've been talking about 5G for years. And to some extent, it feels like the story is changing slowly. But is there anything new? I mean, what do we think is new from the show this year? And sorry, Ronnie, we can't just say AI. But maybe, I mean, do we think there's a new story this year on 5G? I mean, you talked a bit about Open RAN. Is that changing? Is that new? Or what do you think is the new story this year?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think when it comes to 5G and enterprises, we are seeing a lot of new requirements and even readiness, I would say, from telcos. Especially some of the initiatives that we are offering this time is around green slicing. So a lot of positive validation, and in fact, we are working with a couple of operators in the US on the sustainable green slice use cases, which is resonating well with the enterprises. So that's an interesting new area. Where
So a
we
bit
are
of a
seeing good traction.
sustainability. So I mean, Iris, you guys have been leaders in 5G.
Yeah,
What's
we
new?
we were actually the first ones to deploy 5G. Peter, to your point, like I think I was asked even just when we launched 5G, like, oh, 5G is a failure. So I think I've been asked about that one since then. I do disagree though. Like I think we always forget in this industry that technology, it takes time to mature. And if we think about today, like I think we are only now starting to be at the point that even the device ecosystem is starting to be as mature than with LTE. So I think we just kind of like, it takes time. But, and to your point about monetization, I know it wasn't your question, but I was listening to you. So if you think about, for example, fixed wireless access, I think it's a fantastic example of monetizing 5G. And we've seen enormous success with fixed wireless access and actually having it as a primary broadband connection. We are at the moment a market share leader in the US as well. And to your question about something new, so now we are evolving even beyond the connectivity. We are looking at using fixed wireless access as a last mile for wireline connectivity. So that gives us the control of the end-to-end network, but also gives the seamless experience for our customers. At the same time, this year we are looking into providing performance guarantees for fixed wireless access. That allows us to work with companies like Way Networks that are doing semi-autonomous vehicles. Or I'll give you a last example is if you think about public sector. Giving a performance guarantee, giving them opportunity to use a fixed wireless access slice, especially in emergency situations. So I see even new things coming there. So you don't need to think even further than just kind of like fixed wireless access. It's been a fantastic business for us.
But for those of you paying attention, this 2 times in a row we heard slicing coming up. So maybe after the number of years where we've been talking about slicing,
It's happening.
There's a little bit of maybe there's a little bit of an undercurrent of we're actually talking about slicing taking place. Tadhg, I mean, from your perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It has taken time, but O-RAN, like breaking up the base station into different pieces, there's a reason for it. But of course, it made it even longer, right? 2G base stations were complete, 4G base stations, 3G, they were all one unit. But O-RAN itself has been an interesting journey. We don't really care as a core what we're connected to, but it's taken a lot of time. So this year, like we 5G LAN for manufacturing, Industry 5, live on our stand. We wanted to demonstrate that 2-3 years ago. The likes of Acceleran and others in the RIC and in the CU had it, but the rest of the ecosystem, there's no devices, there was no RUs. So it's taken time, but at the same time, like we deployed 5G SA in 2020 with Proximus back then, and it was only us and Huawei had 5G SA at the time. Ericsson and Nokia couldn't demonstrate it. And now it's 2025. But we've been on a very interesting journey. There's been lots happening since then. Like we've over 5,000 private networks around the world in 30 countries. We're a small Irish company, but we're able to do this by working with partners like Oracle, as big as Oracle, Dell, Intel, and then small, 10, 15 people, lifestyle businesses, systems integrators in different countries. So it's taken time. It never happens fast enough. It's taken time, but I think we're at a very exciting juncture right now. And to be able to get spectrum here, we couldn't get it in Hanover Messe, I couldn't believe it, but last year we got 100 megahertz of 5G SA, here we have it again this year. We're showing 5G LAN, what else have I seen? Forgive me for mentioning AI, but it's everywhere, right? So what does it mean? I just went onto the HTC stand because we're live there, to see what they're doing with AI. So they have us live in Nissan, in Japan, Hyundai in South Korea, but they're using AI for, they're monitoring. And it has to be AI really, the amount of volume of data coming at them in the manufacturing process, and when they're scanning the cameras, people going into areas, I'm like, okay, now I get it. We're not just playing with ChatGPT here. I can see the real application for AI in the manufacturing processes there.
So, I mean, it's interesting. You're talking about Open RAN, and maybe this leads to Ronnie, I guess. When we think about what's new with 5G, from your perspective, is it I mean, I know you guys do a lot of work with the AI RAN Alliance, and we're talking about really moving AI into the RAN. But then I want to sort of follow the other trend or the other theme here, which this takes time, right? Because I think the other thing that we've heard, sort of a theme, and to be fair, I'll say that is the other theme I'm kind of picking up over the show, right? Just as an aside, we did a great roundtable yesterday around network APIs. And one of the themes there was, this is going to take time, right? Hey, it's a good idea. We all get network APIs, makes sense, right? Someone said, if we get to the end of 2025 and we've got 2 examples of quality on demand being done, that's a big success. Like, end of 2025, 2 examples, like, yeah, this stuff takes time. So from your perspective, I mean, it feels like in the AI space, it's moving so fast, right? So this patience doesn't seem to be there. And how does that fit into maybe the AI RAN side of things in 5G? That was a big kind of maybe question. I'm not sure. Question mark at the just put a question mark at the end and assume it's a question.
Okay, so I'll try and answer your kind of question. So yes, AI obviously seems like it's accelerating. Things are moving very fast. Of course, we've been working on AI since 2012, so it doesn't seem like it's really moved fast, but the acknowledgement of the impact of AI, I think, since the ChatGPT moment has been great. AI RAN, the AI RAN Alliance was announced a year ago at this show. The Alliance now has actually over 75 members. There were 10 of us as founding members, and we felt that AI wasn't getting a fair billing when it came to the impact of AI on the radio access network. And it comes in 3 flavors. Right? The first flavor is the impact of running a homogeneous infrastructure, meaning there's no proprietary, nothing that's unique about RAN in the infrastructure at all apart from the RU. Everything else is standard AI infrastructure, if you could call it standard. And then how do you deploy that such that it can run an efficient, power-efficient, cost-efficient, high-performance network? That's a software problem that we've been working on for 7 years. And now others are coming on to work on those same platforms. Ericsson, Nokia, Fujitsu, SoftBank, and others. Then there's the flavor of running AI and RAN on the same infrastructure. And how do you orchestrate that? And so when RAN is underutilized, you can ramp up your AI applications. You can enable, again, 5 nines type capability for the RAN. And then perhaps more interestingly, with the 10 demos out here on the floor today, AI for RAN. And that's how AI is being used now, really creating an AI native RAN network. Really exciting demos, include things like uplink performance improvements, spectral efficiency, the ability to be aware of your surroundings and take the data from your surroundings in to optimize. So I think AI RAN and the various flavors are what's new today in the show this year.
No, and I'll say it's interesting because I think this concept of AI on RAN, right? I know talking to a number of operators, they get it, but they're also a little bit conservative, and the idea of taking that capacity that they have and can I really split it between both of those? But I was having a conversation yesterday with one who was talking about just enterprise 5G and enterprise solutions and putting on-prem processing to run solutions which may not run all the time, and what do you do with that spare capacity? And it came at the same time of hearing stories from China where DeepSeek performance has gotten horrible because of all the demand, and so companies are selling servers with DeepSeek on it to ship into enterprises. And you draw that connection there of, well, wait, what? Could you not use the same server if you're doing enterprise? And sort of you talk through those solutions and the light bulb goes off of, okay, I get how maybe those things, I mean, it's maybe not be a surprise that the operator was a member of the AI RAN Alliance. So maybe their thinking was a little bit, but you begin to see this. I guess my worry is, and maybe we'll come back down this way talking about AI, given where we are in the 5G cycle, does this suggest that some of the AI native stuff is more of a 6G story? And I know you guys are doing some work there, or do we really think we'll see the impacts on 5G?
I almost think it's somewhat G-ambivalent, agnostic, really, because when you're seeing like uplink performance and implementation of a neural receiver, it doesn't really matter whether it's 5G or 6G. I mean, nobody really knows yet what 6G is, but we have some indications maybe. But we want to see that benefit of homogeneous infrastructure. We want to see AI 4 RAN benefits in spectral efficiency. We want to see that right now. And so, yes, there's certain aspects of 6G that joint sensing and communication potentially. There's certain aspects that will be capable more in the next generation with different frequency bands. But then at the same time, we want to make 6G a software upgrade rather than a hardware upgrade.
Just if I may,
please.
Like just on the reality, I agree. I don't think it depends on a G. So we were just testing uplink with 480 megabits. And that's significant. So you can do that today. We were testing it. But the reality, when I was talking about network slicing and working with our customers, we're talking about maybe 50 megabits, maybe 100. So that's still the reality. So yes, I think even with 5G, we can get to very significant uplink. But the reality, it will take time that it's actually really needed.
So a real quick one, though, just piggybacking on some of what you're doing, and maybe this plays a bit into what you guys are doing, and maybe you too, Tadhg. I know, and I mentioned this briefly just before, Verizon recently announced some work around edge AI, right? And I think it's a particular, from our perspective, it's a particularly interesting story because I think we began to hear a little bit about inferencing at the edge last year. And it felt like it was one of those things of maybe problem looking for a solution, or we didn't fully know, we didn't fully understand it, but a lot of people were saying, oh, this is going to be huge. A year later, I think the industry has wrapped its head around it of, okay, here's why it makes sense. We've moved beyond just latency. I think there's I think we could do a better job of getting the industry to understand edge is more than about latency. I think we still make that connection. How are you seeing that? Is that a big thing? Is that a small pointed thing? How are you seeing that for you? And then maybe how does that play into some of what you guys are doing on the enterprise side of things and you as well?
Yeah, so we launched what we call our kind of like AI ecosystem strategy, AI Connect. NVIDIA is a very good partner of ours. So if you think about, you mentioned about inferencing. I think I read about a study like by 2030, about 60-70% of AI is actually moving to inferencing. And it's not anymore necessarily centered. So it's going to edge wherever people are. So what we're doing is, because obviously that increases the need of network, and especially at the edge. So we are actually reimagining our existing assets. So we're not making any huge investments. We are using our existing assets, our existing power, space, and cooling across our telco facilities, our existing fiber assets, whether it's backhaul or metro, all of our existing assets, 5G network, edge capabilities, and also programmable network, and using that to truly help the AI ecosystem to move the AI workloads.
Which, well, I'll say, like when the announcement came out, I saw some folks saying it felt underwhelming because there wasn't anything new. But it was also a great example of how you can leverage those assets that you have
yes.
to actually, I mean, that kind of felt like, isn't that we're talking about network monetization? Network monetization shouldn't mean build a new network and make money from it. It should be how do you make money from your existing deployment? Tadhg, what are you guys seeing in terms of some of the stuff you're doing?
Yeah, so we're more, I guess, at the customer edge here. This is a very obvious story for the MNOs, and so they use our software at the edge rather than deploying, let's say, UPF on its own. They can deploy a complete core at the edge. And then we see AI actually being very strategic here because of the compute power that's needed there, the security. So it's really playing into what we've been doing all the way along through the different radio access technologies. And then we see more and more MNOs going, like you're doing now, how do we address these enterprise customers, their needs, the speed, they need this. And then, depending on which vendor you're using, the size of your national infrastructure for your consumer customers, how do you address what are often small projects? Like I remember being in Schiphol when we were looking at 4G, and the big vendors there, not naming any names, are going, there's only 60,000 business users on this campus, whereas we were going, there's 60,000 users. So it's two different markets, I think, and then the operators can scale. They can see a whole, plethora of their customers of different sizes, whereas we're picking them off probably more one by one, or our bigger partners are doing what you're doing. So we're actually seeing both sides of it, seeing how the enterprise can use it. Sometimes they're small, or they're just individual sites from thousands of sites. Yeah. Or they're trying to leverage AI and the new technologies. And none of them care about the details of 5G. They just want to know, what is it going to do for me? Can I do like full virtual reality training? Or if you look at Nissan, they're helping design their cars with the virtual reality. But they don't care if it's Wi-Fi or 5G delivering that
just
connectivity.
Has to work.
As long as it works, exactly. So again, it's taken time, just to go back to the start of this, it's taken time to bring the whole ecosystem together. And we kind of made a shift a couple of years ago where if 5G is a car, we're just the engine in the car. So we got to know all the other parts of the ecosystem. And while we don't deliver the end-to-end solution, we've over 200 partners that do that. But like I'm saying, on the HTC stand, there's a complete story there. And then when someone goes, I want that, they have someone that can deliver it end to end with the SLAs, and they can do it quickly and agilely.
I know, Anshul, and this went from a bit of an AI story to an edge story, but I know you guys have done a lot of edge stuff. How do you see those things playing together for you guys?
Yeah, I think as everyone mentioned, it takes time. Even Rakuten Mobile, when we started in 2018 with Open RAN network and everything, now we are profitable and things are happening. Particularly on the edge concept, I guess. We see a lot of value in the edge in terms of retail, increasing the value for the retail customers. So, for example, in Japan, all of our Rakuten mobile stores, we have an edge deployment where we do host our small cells, femtocells kind of software, but also giving them some real-time insights in terms of what we can upsell. And then we extended this partnership with McDonald's and Google globally. So I think around 2,500 McDonald's stores across the world is going to have Rakuten solution on Google's edge in order to do some inferencing, analytics, and how can we give real-time value to the retail customers. So I think the edge story is picking up. It's taking a bit of time, but I totally agree with some of the use cases you guys mentioned too.
Well, I think the McDonald's example is a really good one because I hear a lot of, again, this focus on latency. But for me, if I think about it, if I'm a McDonald's and I'm running processes on these and those processes go down because my link goes down, I'm running it in the cloud, the link goes down, and my drive-through backs up, that's not great, right? If I'm running at the edge, I get a bit of resilience. So we've got less than 1 minute, but I want to do a quick fire question. What's the one topic from the show that we don't think we're going to be hearing enough about? We think is important, but probably not getting enough attention. Just one sentence, or what do you think?
I do think that we need to hear more about, and I guess it's picking up. It's on the apps, applications, R apps, X apps, D apps.
Okay, cool. Iris?
6G. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Please.
Use cases. The use cases, and what's going to get the customers to buy, to move. Like we're actually seeing, we can show about 12 use cases per vertical now, and it takes at least 8 or 9 to go, because it's not going to be cheap. It shouldn't be cheap. These are critical, robust networks. We're not trying to compete with Wi-Fi. So what's going to make them buy? And it's the use case. It's that need that's being addressed.
Ronnie, what aren't we talking enough about?
You actually already mentioned it. So we're not talking about the edge and the need for the edge. I know you asked for one sentence, so I'll elaborate a little bit on the subhead.
Good.
What I mean by that is that you also mentioned latency. Latency is not critical for connectivity. The connectivity latency is small in comparison to the compute latency. And when we're talking about all these applications that run at the edge, the compute latency, we've done a lot of work understanding how you can run things like agentic flow, vision language models, video search and summarization, and enable that to be at 1 to 1.5 seconds, which is what you have to have some of these. So I think that's the merge of compute and connectivity is kind of, we've focused on connectivity a little bit too much.
I agree. Well, thank you all very much. Can we have a round of applause for our panel? Thank you, guys. I'm lucky. I get to sit down, and we're going to have Mersad from Globalstar come up for a bit of a fireside chat. I'll stand up anyways, just to. Okay, we're going to move towards the middle. That's good. I don't want to sit too far away from you. So, what do you think about AI? I know. We'll maybe talk about AI. But let's, like everyone else, why don't you do a bit of an introduction of who you are? I don't think they need to know who Globalstar. They should all know, but maybe assume they don't.
I'm Mersad Cavcic, and I'm Chief Product and Marketing Officer at Globalstar. I joined the company about a year ago, and it's been an exciting first year. A lot's happening, and I'm really excited to talk to you all about satellite connectivity.
For those folks who don't know a ton about Globalstar, do you want to give a quick background on what you're up to?
Yeah, very quick. So Globalstar is network infrastructure and technology provider. We've been in the satellite space for a very long time. We're actually one of the original LEO satellite operators from the 1990s, from way before LEO was a real buzzword, right? So we're kind of reliving our second youth here. LEO is very popular again. But in addition to providing satellite communications with our constellation, we're actually, and I'll talk about this maybe a little bit later, we're actually providing a lot of terrestrial communications as well. We have our own band 53 spectrum, which is globally available, and we have a very unique XCOM RAN technology and product, which is a 5G distributed MIMO system that manifests really as a significant capacity multiplier compared to other standard 5G systems.
So I guess maybe we'll start with and I definitely want to get to that at some point, but maybe we'll just start with, you sort of framed this saying, look, Globalstar's been around for a while. What's changed or why? So you've seen the ups and downs, right? And it feels like there's been waves of interest in satellite. What's changed? Why is it important now? And I guess why are we having a satellite summit with tons of people coming in 2025? If you look back sort of the history,
I think the basic premise of satellite communications hasn't really changed, right? It was always about connecting the unconnected. We have a large number of people in areas where it's cost prohibitive to build out cellular networks. For those scenarios, satellite communications has always played a really, really interesting role. What has changed recently, especially, and I think Globalstar has had a big role there, is we've seen a real takeoff from direct-to-cell connectivity. This idea of, just a few years ago, taking the satellite connectivity to the phone was almost unimaginable. I'm a trained engineer, and I had my doubts, right, with respect to link budgets and everything else. But a couple of years later, we're here. Globalstar is commercially providing services for the few past years for SOS and general messaging, and I think that's really what's been a little bit different in the last few years. People are seeing that convergence of satellite and terrestrial communications, satellite and cellular, and it's quite exciting. I think in addition to that, there's a larger trend for always-on connectivity that is very relevant in the context of direct-to-cell, but even beyond that, if you think about IoT connectivity, satellite-based, cellular, hybrid mode, I think that's also very, very interesting right now for major enterprises that want that always-on connectivity.
So just a quick question. Of anyone out there, have any of you looked at your phone and seen satellite connectivity at some point on it? I see one person nodding. Anyone else? Two? That's actually not bad, given I've actually had a number of conversations at the show with people who were like, they just thought it was so amazing. Like they were somewhere, they're in the U.S., right? Particularly with, I think, T-Mobile. I mean, it's
a real life-saving technology. I mean, we've heard various reports of people driving in the middle of nowhere, driving off the road, and their phone activating their SOS capability over satellite and reporting this accident, and these people end up being saved, right? So it's a true life-saving technology and service that's been very relevant in the first early few years. I think it's even more relevant now for some general messaging capability. People kind of have that peace of mind, knowing no matter where they are, what things look like around them in terms of cellular coverage, they can check in with their loved ones, and I think that's really valuable.
And I think if we carry over the theme from the last panel a bit, I do think it will take time for people to get that, right? I think one or two people talk about it, but the more and more people talk about it, the value will become clear to everyone else, right? And I think we're seeing that now, which is a good thing in terms of picking up.
I think so, and I also believe that it's part of that maturation process. People are going to realize what's realistic and how we're going to go through this crawl, walk, run strategy. I think initially there's been a lot of discussion from various sources about broadband connectivity to cellular, and I do feel like industry is overstretching itself a little bit, making such statements so early on. At some point, certainly, maybe a possibility, but I think it's great to see real services that are making difference now and that are maturing over time.
And I guess maybe, obviously, we're bringing coverage, we're bringing capacity to new places. Do you see this like birthing new services? Like what sorts of new service, is it mostly just connectivity? Do you see this opening up new opportunities for different types of services? Or is it mostly just an expansion of the business models that we already know?
I think at its baseline, it's still connectivity, right? In some ways, maybe you could call it even supplemental connectivity, because, like I said earlier, I do feel like the industry has overextended itself with, I've even heard people say that satellite is going to replace terrestrial communications, cellular connectivity. I don't think that's going to be the case, right? I think satellite has its place in the ecosystem. Cellular has its place in the ecosystem. What's really exciting is to see the convergence between those typically very independent connectivity technologies that is providing a lot of benefit at the consumer level, but also enterprise side when it comes to satellite IoT, cellular IoT connectivity, and similar.
Yeah, I think it is, to your point, it's still connectivity. It's just you might think about the business differently when you can reach places you couldn't reach before, right? It opens up new opportunities just because of that connectivity and the reach. I guess going back to this idea that the satellite space has been around for a while, Globalstar has been around for a while, we've all seen that. I think we recognize one of the interesting parts of the world right now in terms of satellite is there's so many different providers out there, right? So many different constellations, some that are being built. How do you see competitive differentiation? And from a Globalstar perspective, how do you differentiate yourself compared to, you look at the news, and I think just the number of companies that are out there, and even if you walk the show floor, right? There's these companies maybe you didn't hear about, but they have a small constellation or they have partners. How do you explain what you're doing differently?
I'll say a couple of things. So one of the things that I think does set us apart on the satellite side is the architecture of the satellite constellation we've built, which is a bent pipe architecture. And the relevance of that is it allows us to innovate rather quickly by simply making upgrades at the ground station level, right? So what does that mean practically? Like today, Globalstar actually simultaneously runs 5-6 different waveforms for different services and solutions that we offer to our customers, right? And as people talk about NTN, standards-based NTN technologies and similar, right? We're in a really great position, I think, because of that bent pipe architecture to introduce new technologies, new services, and similar.
And at a very basic level, it's because you don't have to change anything on the satellite.
Nothing on the satellite
which
itself.
Which is a little bit harder to do than on the ground.
A little bit harder, right? You have to relaunch satellites. Now, I will say, I think it's really exciting to see all of the innovation in the satellite space. The entry barrier for launching satellites is dramatically dropped, right? So as a result of that, I think a lot of people are looking into how can I contribute to this innovation in space, right? But at the same time, I would say that, the mega constellations that a lot of people are thinking about are sometimes even overblown and maybe unnecessary, especially in the context of direct-to-cell, right? So I've spent about 10 years of my career developing electronically steerable arrays, which are super relevant for fixed satellite services, right? KU band, KA band, what Starlink, Project Kuiper are doing. Having that capability where you have a pencil beam, electronically steerable, software-defined antenna that you can point in a particular part of sky to connect to a very particular satellite is a critical technology for the future of satellite connectivity. Right? Because you can, from the network perspective, you can remotely manage how these terminals are connecting to which satellites. The more satellites you have, the more opportunity to optimize the capacity and offer that to a growing base of subscriber. Now, there's a lot of, I think, expectation that you can take that model and translate it to direct to cell, right? So if you launch mega constellations, that we can eventually get to, different levels of services, maybe even broadband on the phone. But what I would tell people, and I remind the industry a lot, is the direct-to-cell mega constellations are going to be built on lower frequencies, not at Ku band, not at Ka band. Our phones do not have electronically steerable arrays to form pencil beams that are going to be pointing in a particular part of the skies. The phones have an omnidirectional antenna that are transmitting and receiving from all directions. So if you have 7, 8 different satellites in the field of view in the direct-to-cell mode, that's not additional capacity, that's additional interference that someone has to manage, right? So I think a little bit of reality to level set with all of us to kind of set expectations. I'm not saying someone is not going to figure it out. MIMO systems are similar. I'm pretty sure people are going to be pursuing challenges as opportunities, right? But I think it's important to also say that, hey, the rate at which the satellites have been launched up there doesn't mean we're necessarily going to continue to see that happen, especially in the context of direct-to-cell.
I think it's also fair to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, even if it is solvable at the UE level, that adds costs.
Cost and serious complexity.
Yeah.
So, we, in addition, to kind of come back to your question about differentiation, in addition to satellite connectivity, we do offer terrestrial solutions with our band 53 spectrum, which is globally available, a real differentiator for enterprises that have worldwide operations, right? This idea of establishing a private network, for example, you heard earlier from Druid, they happen to be one of our partners, right? We deploy private networks with Druid Core, with our band 53 spectrum and our own XCOM RAN technology. You create a baseline for a deployment, let's say in the United States. It goes a long way for many of the larger enterprises to be able to take that blueprint that they've built out in the United States, deploy it easily in the same context, with the same equipment, with the same spectrum in Europe, in Africa, in Asia, in other continents and other countries. So our band 53 spectrum really does allow for that. So for those of you that are interested, we're actually, Globalstar has a booth in Hall 2, 2C74. We're running a live demo of XCOM RAN technology, this capacity multiplier on band 53 spectrum. So I would invite those of you that are interested to please stop by and experience it for yourself.
Well, I think that is a great note to end on, if only because we're about to probably get kicked out of the room anyways. It's always good when the conversations go so long that you lose track of time. So thank you, Mersad. Can we get a round of applause?
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Peter. Thank you,
thank you.
GSMA. This was great, and look forward to more of the show this year and see what next year is going to bring.
Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you, guys.